The 1920s were a time of extravagant lifestyles, riskless spending, and exploding markets, mostly brought forward by the decade's economic policy and the expanse of consumerism. The great economic boom of the 1920s, and also consumerism, was brought about to a considerable extent by advertising. During the 1920s, sales of radios rose rapidly. The radio was a completely new medium which allowed instant contact with large numbers of people. By the end of the 1920s, the majority of homes in the United States of America had access to a radio, even if they did not own one themselves. All broadcasting in the USA was a commercial, which meant that it had to be financed by advertisements. Companies were quick to take advantage of the opportunities that the radio offered. Radio programmers were punctuated with adverts and songs, which produced praising products. The American public was bombarded with information encouraging them to buy new consumer goods. Throughout the economic boom during the Roaring Twenties, one field of industry was at the forefront of expansion. The motor car industry was at the forefront of advertising as well. Henry Ford had started out by telling the American people that every American family should have one, meaning one of his cars. When his slogan no longer worked, he changed it to every American family should have two. The great advantage of the new consumer goods was that they made life easier and provided better entertainment. The washing machine, the vacuum cleaner, and the cooker all meant that women did not have to spend so long carrying out boring household chores. For the first time, they actually had time on their hands, always assuming that they could afford to buy the new products in the first place. But even if they could not afford them, there were plenty of ways to buy something that they could not afford. Traveling salesmen toured the United States of America demonstrating new products and offering easy financial terms to householders. Hire purchase became available to almost everyone. For a down payment, you could take advantage of all the new inventions, but of course, that depends on people being able to keep up with the repayments. If people had more labor-saving products to help them with the household chores, that also meant that they had time to spare to take advantage of new forms of entertainment. Not only did people have the time, but they also had the money to pay for them. The 1920s saw a big increase in the popularity of many different forms of entertainment. This was all part of the consumer boom. But first, let's take a look at what was the consumer boom. At the end of World War I, the American industry, whose capacity had significantly expanded during the conflagration, needed new markets to sustain the production of goods. And this brings us back to advertising. These markets were soon made available by the emerging advertising industry, which specialized in creating and maintaining the need for a variety of modern products and services. Advertising campaigns, the radio, and the movie industry standardized American life and undermined regional diversity, but at the same time helped forge a national culture and reinvent behaviors in the form of consumerism. Although the consumerist attitude encouraged waste and triggered an economic downslope movement towards the Great Depression, it also offered ordinary Americans opportunities they had never dreamed of in the previous decades. These, as stated before, included vehicles, radios, new household inventions, including the vacuum and the washing machine, and countless others that improved the life of many Americans. The new consumer goods did not benefit everyone, however. At the same time as sales of radios increased, sales of gramophone records fell. New radio stations opened almost every week, many of them playing music almost non-stop. Radio became widely used for advertising and helped fuel the economic boom of the 1920s. The United States government made no attempt to regulate radio advertising. Advertisers were free to use whatever techniques they wanted in an effort to get people to buy new products. This led to a major increase in the consumerist ideology. To understand how this all came about, we must look at what the government's policy was towards the economy in the 1920s. You see, in the 1920s, the government took a very laissez-faire approach towards the American economy, which essentially means that they kept their hands out of the economic cycle. Americans were free to buy all kinds of newly available consumer goods, and because of this economic policy, companies could do almost anything within their power in order to execute that sale. This meant companies were sending obscene amounts of money in advertisements in order to attract as many American customers as they can, trying to sell the next best thing, thus increasing the spread of the consumerist ideology. Now, let's just do a quick recap. Consumerism was largely a result of an American people who were newly exposed to all kinds of new entertainment forms, such as the movies and radio. This led to companies capitalizing on these outlets and stocking them full of advertisements. These advertisements, which were unregulated due to the laissez-faire governmental economic policy, led to Americans buying anything and everything they could get their hands on, which in turn resulted in Americans living some of the most extravagant lifestyles around the globe. So that pretty much concludes what we have to say here. Kenzie and I would like to thank everyone for watching this. An excellent day learning about, and I'm just glad that you all joined us to learn about the economic policy and the consumerism in the Roaring 20s.